I have a question about what you said in regards to the subtlest level of independent arising.
Oh, what? Start again, that question.
Subtlest level of independent arising.
No, it's not independent arising. There's no such thing. It's dependent arising. Just to be clear,
Okay.
terminology. Because independent arising wouldn't be such a thing, you see. Things can't rise independently. They have to rise dependently. Do you see?
Yes.
Good, darling. What's the question?
Can you please explain that?
Well, I mean, we've explained all of it, isn't it?
Well, what I have is
What?
there is no I inside dependent of the mind labeling it I.
There is no what?
It's confusing.
Okay, good, understand, darling. I'll talk about it. Okay, yeah, I will. Any other questions? Yes.
Hi, my name's Joy.
Yes.
I think it might be
Yes.
in the same vein
Yes.
as Anna's question.
Yes.
I just am not wrapping my mind around the no I.
I understand that, exactly.
Okay,
Of course.
okay.
They study it for 40 years in the monasteries and then go meditate for another 40 for the penny to drop. Okay? If not a few lifetimes after that. So in general, like I said, what Buddha's saying, let's turn this on or something. Buddha's saying in general, you get the drift, the way Buddha's talking about how the delusions aren't cognizing things properly. You got that idea? How the delusions exaggerate things. You get that? Do you see how when you're angry, a person looks really much more ugly than they are? When you calm down, you're a bit embarrassed at your mistake. Do you understand how when you're really attached to something, it looks like it's the most delicious thing, it's going to make you all happy, and then it's actually not like that? Have you noticed that? Do you get that idea? Well, same idea here, but this particular delusion is beneath all the others. It informs all the others. It's the hardest one to see, the hardest mistake to see. You got that idea in general? Okay, and it's called ignorance, known colloquially as ego-grasping, and it over-exaggerates everything that exists. But I mean, this sounds very abstract to us. We can get the idea. We can see how attachment exaggerates things. We can see how aversion exaggerates. But we can't see how ignorance exaggerates because we don't even recognize we've got it. Do you see what I'm saying? So that's part of the problem. Whoever thought that you thought your I was inherent? I mean, we go, oh yeah, really? How fascinating. Whoever thought that? Nobody does, because we don't notice we don't notice that level of mistake in the mind because it's so primordial and so total, and everybody does it. And so even the materialist view is based upon the assumption that there is such an I. All the views we have, all the world about science, the Christian teachings are all based upon the assumption of the existence of what Buddha is saying doesn't exist. So it's quite a hard one to get our head around. Mm-hmm. You with me? So you just have to keep listening, keep working, keep looking, keep analysing, and slowly, you know?
Okay. Thank you.
I mean, it's hard enough to see that anger is a story that we make up. I mean, most of us, when you're really angry with somebody, and someone says, "Well, you know, your anger is distorting the scenario, Robina, and your ex-husband isn't what you think." You know, no one's going to believe it. We'll say, "Don't be ridiculous. Of course, I'm right. He's ugly." No one's going to doubt. We don't doubt. You know, nobody in the world doubts what we think. You don't like a certain thing. You think it's disgusting. You won't ever think that your mind just made it up. That's absurd for us. We just, you know, if something looks revolting, we believe it's revolting. We don't think we made it up to be revolting. This is even just looking at aversion. When somebody looks delicious to you, when you're in love with Jim, you don't go, well, that's very interesting. My attachment's really over-exaggerating his handsomeness. I'm sure he's a lovely human being, but I'm sure I'm exaggerating. No, we don't think that. We totally believe in what we're seeing. This is what Buddha's saying in general, across the board. That's why just to listen to how the ordinary delusions work, forget this deeper one, is extremely important preparation, you know. And if we don't do that, how can we possibly begin to understand this thing called ignorance, which we don't even know exists? We don't have an equivalent delusion. We don't have an equivalent term for it in our culture, you know, as a state of mind that distorts things. We don't even talk this way in our culture. So Buddha's view of the mind is so precise and so unique to the Buddha. It's so particular in its approach. So it really does take time to even hear what Buddha's saying in general. You know, that things don't exist in the way they appear to us. Even that is an abstract statement for us, you know. We can't get our head around that. You know, to take cake that looks so delicious, that makes us so excited, that makes it almost impossible to resist. We know that part. The feeling, the excitement when the delicious object is there. Whether it's handsome Jim or delicious cake. We know about that. But to think that it looks overexciting and it looks extremely delicious and exciting because our mind made up a story, that's pretty abstract for us. But this is exactly what Buddha's saying, you know. As they say in Buddhist psychology, the way things, and here the words they use, the way things, people, events, whatever, appear to us, delicious, ugly, you name it, or no, things appear to us, delicious, ugly, in the aspect, as they say, in the aspect of whatever's in the mind. So, you know, you've got your rose-coloured specs on, guess what? Things look delicious. You've got your ugly, cracked spectacles on, things look ugly. So we kind of do get it, you know, seeing everything through your rose-coloured spectacles. We get that. We hear it, which means the mind sees things a certain way. We hear it that our mothers taught us that, you know, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. That's a profound statement. This is exactly what Buddha's saying. We hear these things, but they're kind of cute cliches, you know, we don't take them seriously. So we can see we have this knowledge. We recognise that we make mountains out of molehills. Our mummies taught us. We hear all these things, but it's exactly what Buddha's saying. And he runs with this in a most profound way, explaining exactly how these neuroses work. You know, that's his expertise. That's the way that's his view of the mind. That's so particular to Buddha. So like I'm saying, there's this root delusion, this deepest neurosis, this known simply as ignorance, Milarepa, unawareness, whose specific job is to, you'd say, is to exaggerate the very ontological status of things in the heart of their being. Beyond their deliciousness and ugliness, but in their thingness itself. Of course it's abstract for us, you know. But this is what Buddha says. We have to learn to understand this, and we have to unpack it and see the lie that this Milarepa is causing us, which is the root of all suffering. So it's got that much importance that without recognizing how it's a lie and then seeing the opposite of it, the truth of the absence of that fantasy I, that's what releases us from all suffering. So, way to go. So the business, the subtlest one, in a way almost can seem easier in some sense. If we look at the world, okay? Look at, when you say, for example, I might say, I'm going to prison. And first, as soon as you hear those words, you think about this. You know what I means, am going to prison. So the way I sort of said it implies, I'm visiting a prison, that's different. I'm going to prison. You kind of pick it up and you go, oh my God, no, Robina, what happened? Straight away you'll hear that. If I'm going to visit a prison, that's different, But you hear, I'm going to prison. So then, okay, this is the point the Buddha's making. We'll hear that and we'll go, oh, I'm so sorry, what did you do? What were you supposed to have done? Or what did you do, Straight away, what we're doing is we're giving those words meaning, aren't we? We're giving them meaning. If you don't know what a prison is, you say, huh? What do you say? Prison, what's that? And then after you hear that it's an ugly place where naughty people are sent, you go, oh, I'm so sorry, Robina. Now, everything's like this. Every single thing we hear, see, do, taste, touch, smell, think about, we end up describing it with a series of words. And then because we've all learned the meaning of those words, we're all having a conversation. But if you didn't learn the meaning of those words, how would you know what's being said? You wouldn't. If you you don't speak English, you'll hear, I'm going to prison. Oh, yeah, really smile at you. I'm going to hell. Oh, really? Thank you very much. Pass me a cup of tea. Oh, really? Thank you. Because you haven't got a clue what's said. A bunch of weird, wacko sounds are coming out of a person's mouth. So it's sort of obvious in a way, right there, proving emptiness. There's no meaning in that until you learn it. You know, we talk about Buddha, up here, look, here's Mr. Manjushri, his orange light body, holding a sword, fire on the tip, wow, wow, you know. He's the Buddha of wisdom. Oh, really, is he? Who says? Oh, you know, well, just blah, 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 you learn about what it is. Well, how do you know? You can't see. He's not saying, hello, I'm Manjushri. Prison's not going, hello, I'm ugly. A flower's not going, hello, I'm a rose. You can look at a rose till the cows come home, so you learn the label. You won't know what it is. Nothing's evident to you. We can't see, it's just shape and colour, you know. You've got to learn the meaning. Learn the meaning. So then we learn the meaning, and then what happens is we then believe it. We believe it. We don't question it. We believe anything we're told. We're idiots. That's why words are so powerful. Anyone ever tells us, you know, I heard that Jim did this, he cheated on his wife. Or did he? Look at Jim suspicious every time you see him now. He cheats on his wife. You never bother to find out if it's true. You don't know if it's true. You have it, and then cheating on his wife has this meaning you put into it. All this kind of garbage we say, you know. Well, Buddha's saying, there's no meaning other than the meaning we give it. And it sounds kind of a bit negative, a bit nihilistic saying that. And what he's saying is, we assume everything has a big fat meaning in the middle of itself, kind of shiny and bright and delicious. There's Jim, there's prison, there's I'm going to prison. It's got meaning, and this is the point, from its own side. Like, I've heard it, and it's real out there, nothing to do with me, nothing to do with my mind. No, I'm just hearing it, and it's real out there. He says nothing can exist this way. And everything we think and do and say is riddled with this mistake we're making. We see everything, that's what his words for, what his words are. We see everything as inherent, meaning the meaning is in and of itself, in it, without in our mind playing any role. This is the subtlest meaning of emptiness. Forget the little, mini me in there. That's the grosser one, which is already hard to see. You know, as Rinpoche never stops talking, you read his article in here, everything's merely labelled. That's all he ever says, everything's merely labelled. It's infuriating, because you haven't got a clue what he's talking about. He keeps saying it, there's nothing from the side of the object. There's no meaning in anything. He doesn't say the word meaning, but you say that, it's really a perfect way to put it. And this is Buddha's literal point. Over eons of time, our minds are all there is that has ever existed, that has ever created anything. Everything, forever, since the beginning of this time, has come from the mind. There's nowhere else for it to come from. So Buddha's saying, everything that exists, and you first have to establish what that is before you start to talk about it. You have to establish an existent, to establish an established base, to establish a phenomenon first, a cup, the name cup, what's a cup? You have to define it, you know, tell you its function, then you prove it, and then you check it, and then now we all talk about cups, and everything is like that. You have to name it, define it, prove that it is that, that it does fulfill its function. This fulfilling a function is massively important. You know, you can say anything's a cup. Oh, there's a cup. What's a cup, Mum? Well, it's a thing with a blob on it. Who says? Don't just believe it. We believe anything we're told. Excuse me, who says it's that? Please tell me what a bobble on top is. What does it do, you know? Then you soon prove it's not a cup. If you have the definition that a cup holds your tea, this is clearly, well, it could function as a cup of a very small cup. We can see that. It could, indeed. You know, pour my tea in there. Drink. But we know that's called a lid. But it could be. So what's a lid, Mum? It's what you put on top of a cup to keep the tea warm. Of course it could function as something else. It could function as a toilet, a very small person's toilet. It could. And this is the point. This is the point, you know. You'd say, this is the point. That my friend, for example, some of my friends in prison are happy in prison, okay? They're happy. They've changed their minds and they've decided they're happy. Like that Florida lady. So the point Buddha's making is very simple. We know, conventionally speaking, there's conventional and ultimate. Conventionally, it is correct to say a prison is an ugly house where you're sent when you're naughty. Let's say that's the definition of a prison. That's a perfect definition. We all know. As soon as you know, so you've got to go to prison. You go, oh my God, no. You don't look up a thing and go, oh, look, there's free rent. I'll go and move into prison. No, no way. You don't want to live in a prison. And look at the meaning. It's packed with meaning, isn't it? It's packed with so much meaning. Talk about attachment to reputation. Just the thought of letting people know you're going to go to prison is like a hell. Because you're forever seen as a garbage person now, you know? Evil, people don't like you, you're naughty, you're a criminal. Look at the meaning. It's packed with meaning. Well, you've got to ask yourself the question, where's the meaning come from? You've got to analyse it, unpack it. Well, you know, of course you don't want to go to prison. Well, excuse me, why not? I've been to some very nice prisons. Much better than an ugly old homeless place sometimes. You've got a cover, you have okay, it's crummy food. But it's still food, you've got a house. You know, many people say they'll go back to prison because it's easier than living a homeless life. Some people, they say like that. So, you know, where's the meaning come from? What's the meaning? You unpack it. You unpack it. And you see, what we're doing is, what Buddha's saying is we're looking for the inherent meaning. We think it's inherent because we don't even know what inherent means. But what it means is this. And the inherent is the subtlest meaning. If prison were inherently ugly, it would be ugly no matter what. It will be ugly no matter what. It will be, that's what it means by ugly from its own side. Like once you get there, automatically, suddenly you would start suffering. And that means you could never be happy. Because ugly is cause of suffering. And, you know, nice is cause of happiness, let's say. A nice place, an ugly place. So an ugly place, you know, conventionally speaking, prison does fit the definition exactly. It's an ugly place where you're sent when you're naughty. You can't get out. You have to have permission. You're treated like a creep. You're the lowest in society. You know, no one likes being there. All these things. Tick the boxes. Tick, tick, tick. It's exactly, conventionally, it is that. Conventionally, this is a cup that does hold, in fact, my water. It functions as that. So then what happens is this, is the two truths. The dependent arising truth. And then the flip side of dependent arising, this one, is the wrong view that concretizes it, that sees it as permanent and eternal, and indeed eventually as inherent. So as soon as we hear, okay, then you got emptiness, ultimate reality. There is no cup from its own side. There's nothing in the cup that makes it a cup. There's no meaning in the cup that mind hasn't given it. But, as Lama Tsongkhapa says, nevertheless, it does function exactly as defined. But as Lama Zopa says, when you realise there's nothing from the side of the cup, nothing out there, nothing in and of itself, nothing inherently, nothing intrinsically, nothing from the side of the cup that makes it that. In fact, there's nothing from the side of the cup, there's nothing in the cup, there's no cup, there's no meaning in the cup that mind hasn't given it. There's no cup that isn't merely labelled by the mind cup. There's nothing. So when we hear these words, it sounds so dramatic and it sounds nihilistic. Oh, I see, there's no cup. Okay, We won't kill ourselves because we get so depressed. So as soon as we hear how there's no cup from its own side, there's no cup that has any meaning apart from what my mind gives it, there's no non-merely labelled cup, there's only a merely labelled cup. As soon as we hear there's no non-merely labelled cup, we can't help but think there's no cup, and we chuck the baby out of the bathwater. We go to the wrong extreme called nihilism that says there is no cup. It seems like natural to say that. Oh, I see, there's no self, we'll say. That's a misinterpretation. It's more nuanced than that. But it's hard to hear it. Why? Is because the nihilistic view, which is really the depressed, life is worthless, I might as well kill myself view, which is in our minds already, when attachment stops getting what it wants, kind of go down to despair, there's nothing there, what's the point, might as well die. That's the nihilistic view. That comes naturally to us as soon as we hear there is no cup from its own side. There's no cup in and of itself. There's no inherent cup. There's no intrinsic cup. There's no self-existent cup. There's no cup in and of itself. There's no cup that isn't merely labelled by the mind cup. That one. As soon as we hear all that, we think there's no cup. But that's the nihilistic view. You've just gone too far. You just chucked out too much. That's the big danger. Then as soon as you hear, well, you know what, there is a dependent arising cup that does function, that holds my tea, and we go, oh, thank goodness, grasp. What a relief, there is something after all. No, that's the other extreme. That's what we'll call the eternalistic one. And that's like the up mode, perky, everything's wonderful, now I'm happy, now I finally found happiness, blah, blah, blah one. Emotionally speaking. Both, the Buddha says, both are exaggerations. Both are distorted views. The middle way view is the view that understands that every time you hear there is a dependent arising cup that does function, as soon as you hear that, you don't go to grasp at it, but you go instead towards the middle way, and then you go, aha, that means there is no cup from its own side. And then every time you hear about emptiness, there's no cup from its own side, you don't chuck the baby out with the bathwater and become nihilistic. You go towards the middle way and you go, that means there is a dependent arising cup that does function. So at the moment, dependent arising, that there is a cup that does exist in dependence upon various factors, causes, parts, and most subtly the mind calling it that. As soon as we hear that, we over-reify. We reify. And then as soon as we hear there's no cup, we under-exaggerate. We chuck it out. We think there's nothing. And these are the main mistakes that our mind makes just naturally, instinctively, emotionally, all the time. You could say like that. So philosophically speaking, the view of a creator, the view of a soul, that's the reification process. That is a product of this philosophical view in the minds of sentient beings. We've literally created that view of making eternal, of reifying. What Buddha would call superior being. He agrees with that too, and he has a word, superior being. Over-exaggerating. Seeing it as permanent, unchanging, uncaused, and the source of everything else. That view, that is a philosophical view created by the minds of human beings who buy into the view of self-existence, the view of inherent existence, which is the function of the ignorance, which is the root delusion. So it's informing every millisecond of every experience, thought, feeling, emotion, everything we've ever experienced in samsara, all the time, every second. There's not a millisecond it's not informing. You mightn't be conscious of it, but everything, as I say, everything appears to us. As having this status, self-existence, inherent existence. So it's hard to even see that we do it, because we're doing it all the time and have been doing it since the beginning of time, and this is what causes us to be born into samsara, the top suburbs of the God realms to the lowest suburbs of the hell realms for eons, Buddha says. Then the nihilistic view, which is the worst one, you could almost say that the materialist view, I think the materialist view is that there's nothing, it's just a bunch of matter. You live, you die, you turn into dust, you know. And that causes, and that what we do and think in our mind has no results, no effect, you know. It's like nihilistic view. So if you think about emotionally, that's just my way of saying this, so extrapolating, you know. Emotionally, this is the up mode of when attachment gets what it wants and everything's permanent, divine, and perfect. Now finally I found happiness. Everything is now perfect. Finally it's there, I've got it. And we seal it into permanence, you know. Because we can't stand the thought that it will change. Finally I found happiness. Now I understand. Everything is perfect. That's the reification process. We desperately do it all the time. And when the bubble bursts, because it must, because it's not realistic, we go collapsing down to despair. Nothing is worthwhile. Nothing to look forward to. That's when we commit suicide. Nothing to look forward to. So attachment and aversion, you could say in day-to-day life, are the manifestation of these two misconceptions in the mind. I'm not kidding when I say that's bipolar. We're all bipolar. It's just a question of degree. I'm not joking. I'm not joking, okay? I'm serious. So he's very dramatic when he talks about, merely labelled. He doesn't pussyfoot. He says, he keeps saying there's not one atom of anything in the cup that makes it a cup. It's kind of scary to say that. And they say all the other Buddhist views, the earlier views before this view, kind of end up saying, there's got to be something. There's got to be something. There's got to be something there. So they would say, when you realise the absence of the little of the landlord, the absence of what we said before, the little mini me. They agree ultimately there is no I from its own side, but conventionally they'll say among the parts in the mind you will find something that can bear the label I, because if you didn't have that there would be nothing. But this view that our lamas teach, the Prasangika view, they say is like scary, it's like jumping off a cliff. You say there is nothing from the side of the object, but it doesn't mean there's nothing. That's the tricky bit. It's not being clever. Someone says, well, he talked to me in Sydney about emptiness. He said, when sometimes you might have an experience of emptiness, there's like fear comes. Don't be scared of it. Go into it. Don't resist it, because then you'll make the mistake of reifying. Because you won't disappear. It's not possible. There is nothing to be afraid of. So if fear does come, it's good. So there's another whole way to talk here now, which I find very helpful to help us get our heads around this weird idea of emptiness. It's such a strange word for us. We just don't know how to get our heads around it. We can't even use it properly, you know. And of course because we haven't learned the way they talk in the Buddhist philosophical view, which is coming from these great Indians. Well, the Buddhists anyway, the Buddha. So let's just get our head around the use of this word, because it's not totally uncommon to us, but we use it in a different way. But let's look at the way we use it, looking like the way Buddha uses it. So if I look into my cup, I go, oh, my cup's empty. I could say that, couldn't I? And we all know what I mean. What do I mean?
There's nothing in it.
Thank you. You go into the room, no, sorry, the room's empty. What do we mean? No people there. Because that's just conventional, we get used to it. So listen to this. There is something that does exist, which is the cup, that lacks something that doesn't exist there. That's a way of saying it, isn't it? It's a way of saying it, right? Talking about water now, not fancy Buddhist one. There is a cup, there's a thing that does exist, a cup that lacks a thing that doesn't, water, in my case, water. You get my point here? Mm-hmm. So we're used to the term, it's empty. So you look in your bank, oh God, it's empty. We all know it means there's no dollars there. Right? We agree with that, don't we? So it's a term we're used to. The cup's empty, the room's empty, the bank account's empty, you know. So you know, this is an important point now, that the meaning is empty of something that you expected to be there, or you'd like it to be there, right? Do you understand that? Or not necessarily like. You know, if Jim leaves me for a younger version, every time I go home, I will notice more than anything the absence of Jim in my house, won't I? The emptiness of Jim. Emptiness meaning a word for something that doesn't exist. Can you hear that? Mm-hmm. Can you hear that? All I will notice is no Jim in the house. You come and visit, you don't know I had a husband, you won't notice no Jim, will you? Why? This is the point now. Why?
You don't expect him to be there.
What? Say it.
You don't expect him to be there.
Thank you. Is that not true? We get that, don't we? So if you don't expect there to be any water in that cup, when you look in the cup, you won't get a surprise, will you? If you don't expect there to be any dollars in your account, you won't be surprised. You won't see, oh, there's no dollars, because you kind of knew it already. So this noticing of the absence of something is always a bit of a shock to us. Are you with me here a little bit? Mm-hmm. So this is the Buddha's way of talking. Exactly. Okay, so this cup is not, this is not red, is it? This is not red, is it?
No.
Right, we all know that. Why? Not because you're believing in it, because we've all established with the eyes, with a certain light and that certain paint on this particular surface, it appears as blue. So we all tick off, we all sign the contract, we call it blue. Conventionally, we've established blue as existing as a convention, haven't we? So we all agree with it. Good. Jim's colourblind. Poor bloke, he can't see. Every time blue appears to him, what does he see? Red. Now we know he's making a mistake, and we keep trying to tell him it's not really, but he tries to remember it's not really, but he forgets because he believes in what he sees. So we think, oh, stop trying to get him to believe what it really is. Let's just fix his eyes. So we send him off. We fix his eyes, and then you show him the blue cup again. What does he see this time?
Red.
We just fix his eyes.
He still sees red
But
because his mind is telling him that it was red as it was before.
No. His eyes were telling him it's red. This is a simple example. His eyes were seeing red before.
But his mind was...
No, never mind his mind. He's now seeing... No. Yes, his eyes being mistaken, cognized, red appeared, so then he called it red. Mm-hmm. So now when he goes, and please now, so really thank you, it's helpful, but listen, we fixed his eyes. Right. His eyes now will see the colour. Its job of eye consciousness is to cognize colour. So that he's now got nothing in between him and the colour, so blue will appear to him. But what will he see? What will he say?
See red.
No, he won't see red. Listen to me. Okay, go on.
No, his eye sense will see blue.
Not yet. It won't. This is my point. You listen to this. Okay, that's right. Sure. So listen. No, if he, no, you won't.
My mind got squeezed.
No, it's okay. So what? Okay. I'll tell you what Buddha says, and you see if you agree with him. Okay. Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. That's right. Precisely.
Okay.
Part of what you're saying is true, but when you hear this, you'll get the point. The blue does appear to him, and his eyes are no longer a mistake. The eyes are cognizing correct. Because eye consciousness does have the capacity to cognize colour. That's its job. So the eyes are working properly now. But you listen to this. When he sees it, he will go, oh my God, it's not red. So what he will see will be the absence of red, the emptiness of red. Why? Because partly what you're saying is true, because he's expecting red.
Yeah.
So he'll get a big fat shock. Can you hear that?
I think
he's
so.
Expecting red.
Right.
He's expecting red. He's thought of red all his life.
Well,
he's completely expecting red.
He is merely labeled...
No, you're getting carried away now. It's more simple than that.
Okay.
Forgive me, it's more simple than that.
Yeah.
Merely label's fine. Perfect. Nothing wrong with merely labeled.
I guess the eye consciousness and the mental consciousness, I'm kind of...
No, but what you're saying is indicate. It's perfect. You're right. That's why he'll get a shock. Mentally he'll get a shock. His eyes aren't shocked. They can't get shocked. The eyes are seeing the truth, but because he's used to seeing red and he believes in red, he gets the shock of his life. He'll go, oh my God, it's not red. He kind of wants it to be red. He gets a big shock because he's seen the truth finally. But the point first is this. Another example, I like this example. You really believe there's $20,000 in your bank because you've saved them up. You know you work really hard, you've saved your dollars, you look each year, or each month, each whatever, how long it takes you, you know, and you've got your $20,000 in the bank and you absolutely know it's there and finally you're going to spend it. You thought about it, imagined it, saved it, worked it out, done the numbers, there's your 20,000. And now you open the bank, you go into the account, you put your password in, you get the statement, and what's written there is a zero. What's written is a zero. Well, believe me, you won't go, oh, no money in the bank, and close the statement. You'll go, oh my God, there's no $20,000. So you will see the emptiness of $20,000. If you expect tea in your cup, you're convinced you put tea in your cup. Oh my God, where's my tea? If you're convinced, you know, it's red, and when you see the truth, you'll see the absence of the thing you expected. Can you hear that idea?
Mm-hmm. It's actually easier for me. I just tried to be, instead of saying it was Jim doing it, if you say it's yourself. And I used to.
Oh, okay. That's good for you then. Work out whatever works for your mind.
Yeah.
Good, okay, good. Can you hear the dollar one?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But if in fact there is not $20,000 in the account,
The zero, yeah.
there's nothing,
No.
then there is no $20,000. $20,000 doesn't exist.
No, that's right, but that's, okay, the point here is, yes, right, exactly. So, you have saved before, something went wrong and it's disappeared. There was $20,000. You
Right.
believe in your $20,000. You're expecting your $20,000. You can't wait to spend your $20,000. But something went wrong and the bank has taken your money, or some person's come in and taken your money. So all I'm saying is, there is a zero, and what I'm getting at here is a very interesting point. When we hear emptiness, we go, oh, nothing there, no I, like a big hole, like empty bank account. But the point here is this. You believe 1,000,000,000% in your $20,000. I mean, reasonably, you put it there. Right? You with me? Can you hear that? You put your 20,000.
I get what you're saying, but I think that you can't say that if there's nothing in your bank account, there literally is no money.
That's right.
That you wouldn't say that the 20,000, that's the emptiness of the $20,000.
Yeah, that's what you're saying. That's why you get a shock. That's what Lamazopa says. That's the point. That's the point. There's never been a Jane in there, and when you finally, he's saying there is a zero in there. He's saying there is no Jane in there. He's saying that. There has never been a Jane as long as Jane has existed.
But there's a merely
No, we're not
labeled
discussing
Jane.
that.
No, but there's not even if there's zero money in the bank, you don't even have a.
But we're not even but we're not going there yet, because that's what you realise.
But that's what I'm. That's the issue I'm taking.
No,
with
but
you.
you've leapt ahead because we've got to realise emptiness first. Then you realise merely labelled.
But there's no $20,000, so then you can't.
That's the point.
It's
That's
not,
the proof.
It's not merely labeled. And
No, it's the proof.
not-
No. Okay. This example is not to prove merely labelled. The case of merely labelled is what does exist. So let's forget the merely labelled, because that's the term for what does exist when we finally realise emptiness. So what I'm saying here is as an example of how the process works. Of you've made a mistake, you believe there's going to be you believe there's 20,000. You believe in a thing that doesn't exist. $20,000. That point clear first? Mm-hmm. No, can you follow my thinking, please?
Yeah.
I hear really your point, Jane, and I'm not arguing with you.
Yeah, okay.
But so hear the way I'm saying it, and I think we're coming to the same conclusion.
Okay.
Do you accept it's possible to have saved up $20,000 and then somehow it gets stolen? That's possible, isn't it?
Right.
So therefore, it's possible to believe 100% in the presence of $20,000 in your bank. Would you agree with that? That's possible.
Yes.
And are you possible when you look into your account and you're expecting 100% $20,000? And it's possible, therefore, to see a zero, and naturally you're going to get a shock. Would you agree you'd get a shock?
Yes.
And you'll go, oh my God, where's my $20,000?
Right.
Will you accept that possibility? Yes. Okay. That is equivalent to the recognition of the emptiness of the I. So the first thing you see is the absence of what you thought was there. And then, as Lama Zopa says, then you realize what is there. In the case of the I, it's the merely labelled I. In the case of the bank, it's a zero. So it's just an example. So here, with Jim, it's exactly the same scenario. He believes this is red. He's made a mistake. He's fixed the problem. he now looks on here, and what he sees first is, oh my God, the absence of red. The absence of what he thought was there. Then the next step is he finally realizes the conventional truth. He then finally realizes blue. So merely labeled is the conventional truth. That's what's realized after you realize
But the
emptiness.
difference is that the cup actually is blue. The difference is that in the bank there is not one penny.
Yeah, but it's the same thing. Doesn't matter.
Okay.
I'm using it as an example
Yeah, okay.
because zero is just a concept. Blue is a concept. They both have equality in terms of it being a concept. And it's a good example for me because we tend to think that zero means, that emptiness means nihilism. So for me, we would think, okay, I use it purposely because we think, oh, like His Holiness said one time, emptiness isn't pulling out all the bits and pieces and ending up with nothing. That's like removing all your dollars and you end up with zero. That's nihilism, actually. It's an equivalent of nihilism. Oh, well, there's nothing there. No. I know what you're saying, but zero and blue are synonymous in this case of being what does exist. Zero does exist in the bank.
But then in your example, you're saying that in fact the 20,000 does exist, but just in that
No,
moment.
no, I'm not saying that.
See, I mean, I'm not going to belabor it, but I think it's not a good example. I don't think
Maybe
it's
the
the
bank
same.
isn't a good example.
It's the best example.
No, because
No, you're...
if he thought the cup was red and then he realized it was blue, and the cup actually is blue.
Yeah, but so is zero. Zero is real. Why are you
Zero
putting...
isn't $20,000.
No, nor is blue red. But blue is not red.
But the blue is blue.
But that's not... But zero is zero.
Zero's also
No, now we're just
Zero is
getting...
not 20,000.
No, that's not the point. That's the point. I think we're not communicating. That's okay.
Yeah, that's okay.
We're not communicating. We're talking different things here. We are talking different things. It's okay. So it doesn't work for your mind. Just don't use that example.
Okay.
The point I'm trying to say is the mind believes in something. Buddha's saying that our mind believes in something that doesn't exist. He's saying that. We believe that something, there is some, okay, put it this way, even this way, as Lama Zopa says, okay, there is something that does exist, a blue cup. There is something that does exist, a bank account with nothing in it. That does exist. So it's the same. A blue cup or a bank account with nothing in it. What's the name of the bank account? What's the name of a bank account with zero? It does exist as a convention and it's called a bank account with nothing in it.
Yeah, but it's not a bank account with $20,000.
That's the point. But no, please, Jane, you've got to listen. You're missing the point, may I suggest, but I don't want to be argumentative here, which I am being. Okay, please. It's just going to throw everybody, never mind. Okay. No, I'll keep going. This is the way to think about it.
maybe
Buddha's saying you first establish something that does exist conventionally, and that even is tricky itself. Then you look into how it does exist. So we have to first establish a blue cup. We first establish a bank account with nothing in it. We establish a person. We establish a microphone. Whatever you decide is the thing you're now about to discuss. A microphone is a name we give to a black thing that amplifies sound. A cup is the name of a thing that holds your tea. Or we could even say, okay, forget the bank account. If this doesn't work for your mind, I'll leave the bank account out. I don't care. It's just an example. And it doesn't work for your mind, so I don't want to be argumentative. But just forget the bank account. Buddha's saying we first have to establish conventionally what does exist. Just conventionally, the name and the definition. Then we have to be clear about that. So here is a person. Here's a person. We're all called a person. There's a cup. Forget blue now. It doesn't matter. Blue's not the point. There's a cup. Well, here's a person. No, the blue cup's a good example. It's a conventional example. It's an analogy. Okay. What I was trying to get at is this with Jim example. Simple example. Jim has believed he accepts as a cup, but he has believed it's a red cup. He's got some fact about it wrong. We both agree it's a cup. We both agree there's a cup, but he thinks it's red and reality says it's blue. So he believes in something on the cup. Put it this way. He believes in something that does exist on the cup that doesn't exist there. The Buddha says we believe that does exist something, as Lama Zopa puts it, on the aggregates, on the person, even on the person. There is a person. We have to accept conventionally there's a person. So Buddha's saying, just like with Jim embellishing something on the cup that doesn't exist there, red, Buddha says we embellish on what does exist here, something that does exist, an inherent person. So inherent person is equivalent to seeing red where it doesn't exist. There is a cup that is blue that does exist. There is a person, there's a dependent arising that does exist. And the mistake is decorating, as Rinpoche says, on top of what does exist. A mistake. The mistake is inherent me. Okay, we don't know what that means. We have to find out. But what we see when we see the person is an inherent person. When he sees the blue cup, he sees a red cup. So we have to see, on the basis of what does exist, we have to see the absence of what doesn't exist there. When he fixes his eyes, he sees the absence of the thing that doesn't exist there. That's the equivalent of seeing the absence of the inherent I on the eye. So there is an I that does exist, Rinpoche says. And ignorance is imputing upon it a characteristic that doesn't exist there, which Buddha calls inherent existence. Never mind what it means yet. Like the red, it doesn't exist there. You fix his eyes in this case, you fix your mind in this case, and what will now appear to you is first the absence of that mistake. Oh my God, it's not red. Oh my God, oh my God, there's the absence of the I you thought was there. And as Rinpoche says, when you first see that absence on what does exist, the conventional I, on what does exist, the conventional I, you will recognize, you will see for the first time the absence of the absence of the inherent I. So at the moment, we can't tell the difference between the real I and the wrong I. That's how he says. So the first response is absolute fear. But the really greatest yogis have bliss when they see the absence of the fantasy bit that ignorance has imputed upon the bit that does exist. Do you agree with that, Jane?
I'll tell you where I think it gets confusing is that the cup, the blue cup, that's my understanding is the blue cup doesn't exist the way we think it exists.
No, but that's using apples and oranges.
But
We're talking about a red
the
cup.
problem with your use of saying the thing about the red cup and the zero in the bank account is that where it gets confusing for me is that it isn't red.
That's not the discussion, and it's not. But we're not inherent either. But we're not inherent, Jane.
I know, but
same equivalent.
But it is true that Robina does exist on.
It is true that blue cup exists on the cup,
but it does not exist. The red is some fantasy.
So is the inherent I. Excuse me. So is the inherent I. It never has existed ever on those aggregates there. So it's exactly correct.
Okay, now I get it.
Thank you. That's the point. So that's why Lama Zopa says that, the dependent arising is such a powerful, tasty bringing together of seeming contradictions. We either go, oh my God, there's a divine, delicious I up there for so-and-so, delicious, sweet, sweet, lovely, lovely. That's reifying it. That's an exaggeration. Then we have the one, there's no I completely. That's a de-exaggeration. And we run between these these wrong views continuously. So that's why Lama Zopa was saying, when you realize the absence of what you thought was there, the absence of what you thought was there, meaning the emptiness of the inherent I, and don't even forget whether you know what inherent I means yet, we'll go into that too, the absence of what you thought was there, when you see that, as soon as we hear that, we think, we have to remember it means that there is the I that does exist. But as Lama Zopa says, what does exist is so subtle, it's as if it doesn't. That's the tricky part. So never think it means there's no I, period. Never, never, never. Because there is something that does exist, but as he says, it's so subtle, it's as if it doesn't. And that's that's the hardest one to get, apparently. That's the hardest one to get.
So it doesn't exist as we think it does.
The
'cause
I
of our
doesn't exist in the way we
ignorance,
think it does. That's
'cause we're
right.
obscured
The,
by
delu-
all
the
of our
ignorance,
delusions.
the ignorance, or even more precise in this case, the function of the root delusion labeled ignorance is to impute upon what is there, or within what's there, a little inherent I that isn't there. So the trick is to understand exactly what inherent I means. That's the difficult part. That's the difficult part. That's the part that needs the thinking. You can say emptiness till the cows come home, but if you don't know what water is, you'll never know what emptiness of water means. You've got to first establish what water is, then you can see the absence of it. So you have to first establish what you think the I would be, then you can establish the absence of it. And that's the tricky part. That's the hardest part. They say once you've got real clarity about what you think the inherent I is, it's easy to engage it. It's easy to realize emptiness. And that's the part that takes the longest time. That's what they say. What's the point?
It seems that the part that wants to be, it's the mental continuum wants to be, is the thing that
Well, one of the
Buddhist inherent I.
Well, one of the Buddhist schools says that the continuum is. But let's discuss that. Let's look at that. So first of all, let's establish. What's your name?
David.
David. Let's establish that David is a person. You accept that David is a name of a person, okay? And that you bear the label person. Yeah, that'll do. So, what are the two main? Would you say the essential main components of this person here? Body and mind. Would you agree with that? Using Buddha's view, you got two parts, right? Body and mind.
Mm-hmm.
You want to summarize it.
Mm-hmm.
So, a person is a name we give to a combination of a body and a mind. Would you agree with that?
Mm-hmm.
You agree with that definition? That'll do for now? Will it?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yes.
So now somebody says, but there has to be something there that is an inherent I. Inherent means independent. You've got to understand that point. It's got to mean independent. Independent of everything else.
Right.
Independent. So they all say, well, there has to be something, so it's got to be the mind that is the self. Well, you just told me that self is a term referring to a body and mind. So how can you have on the one side, self is a term you refer to body and mind, but suddenly now it's referring to your mind? Make up your mind. Is it your mind or is it both? You can't have it both ways. So for me, that's an immediate logical argument.
Right.
It can't be just the mind, because we've just agreed conventionally a self is a term given to a combination of a body and a mind, not the one piece. So how can the mind be a self, if that's the case?
I'm saying I think that is what we have, these sensory perceptions, and the mind or the mental consciousness is creating, and it's partly language too, or it's language and culture where we're then labeling things and
I don't know what you're saying. What are you saying to me, David?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, then don't say it until you're sure.
Okay.
He's going to be determined to continue. Go on.
The part that wants to be labeled.
Just a minute. Who wants? Excuse me. Speak for yourself.
There's. Oh, okay.
You mean there's part of David's mind that wants to think there is something that does bear the label self. That's what you're saying, and it has to be the mind, the mental continuum. That's what you're suggesting.
I think in response.
David, speak for yourself, please. Don't
I
speak
am.
in general terms.
No, I am. Oh, okay. I'll wait.
Okay. Yeah. Go.
Me? I'm not Paola. My name is Paola. But anyway, my ignorance makes me associate my happiness with my I. So
Your happiness with your I.
My ignorance, I know my attachment, my aversions, like my happiness with the I, my I. My question is, what is the recipe to emptiness? The I first, and to be happy without the I.
Well, Buddha would say, as Lama would say, when you've finally proved this ignorance as a liar, when you finally prove the ignorance that clings to the fantasy I as a liar, you've seen the truth of that, That means you've realized the absence of the fantasy I, and then he says, then no fear, only bliss. That's the recipe for getting happy, to realize emptiness.
But no fear comes, so there's no fear and there comes happiness?
Well, what do you think's left if you have no fear? What else would there be left but happiness? There's only virtuous and non-virtuous states of mind. So when the mind is free of all the... Okay, what's interesting is very interesting. If you look at the Buddhist model of the mind, you will find there's no status given to the state of mind called fear. It's not one of the many delusions. Because why? Because all the delusions, in particular the root delusion called ego grasping, their main voice is fear. Fear is what they're all about. So when you realize the absence of the fantasy I, there is no fear. Therefore, there's only bliss. Mind clear, wise, compassionate, loving. It can only be this, nothing else. That's what's left. This lovely story Rinpoche told years ago about when he was 8 years old. So Lama Zopa Rinpoche was recognized as a very little boy as the reincarnation of a previous yogi in the mountains. He's a Sherpa, right? Since he was tiny, apparently, his sister said, she's a nun, as soon as Mummy turned her back, little Zopa's crawling up the mountain, where they know the cave of the previous yogi called Kunsang Yeshi, who had passed away, used to live. And every time, then she'd drag him home, and then when he started to talk and walk, then as soon as she turned her back again, little Zopa's walking up the hill. Come home, she'd say. He'd say, no, that is my home. So they all say that these yogis, who, if they are, they're recognised lamas, they've been meditators in their past life, they've gone through the death process completely clearly, without mistake, without confusion, and they can choose their next rebirth. So, somebody said something? No. Okay. So, anyway, his sister said also, when he started to play games, he'd always play the role of a lama. And he'd make mud pie bells and mud pie dorjis and mud pie torma cakes. And he'd announce that all his benefactors were coming to the puja. And he'd list all his previous life benefactors of Kunsang Yeshi. So his mother figured, well, better check up who he is, So she got the local lamas to do their divinations. And they said it does appear he is the reincarnation of this Kunsang Yeshi, this Nyingma yogi. So anyway, he was handed over to a monastery, and he had a manager. They're very professional, these Tibetans, these Buddhists. So he's up in a mountain one time with his manager, he said, when he was 8. And there's this big river. And across the other side of the river, these strange-looking, pale-faced people with pale eyes and straw-coloured hair. Anglos, okay? White people. So he's never met any white people before. This is like 58 or something, 1954, something like that, 53. So he really wants to go meet them. And his manager didn't want him to go, but he insisted. So he bought a bowl of potatoes, and he's walking across the bank, the rickety bridge, and he falls in with his bowl of potatoes. So then how he told the story is this. He said, the head came up to the surface. And he could see his manager running on the bank, freaking out, up for air. He come up for air because they don't teach him swimming up there, right? I presume. And then he said, the thought occurred to me, the person known as the Laudo Lama, that was the name he was given. I've never known. I always heard it's either radishes or onions. Do you know? It used to be where they stored the radishes or the onions, and the last life, he kind of pulled out the radishes and moved in, That was his home for the last 30 years of his life. So he's known as the Radish Lama, or whatever it was. The Laudo Lama. He said the thought occurred, there he is drowning, okay? The head going up, going down, gasping for air. He said, the thought occurred to me, the person known as the Laudo Lama is about to die. And then he said, I didn't know anything about emptiness, which means in that life he hadn't heard the words, but there was no fear. So the point is this, I find this very interesting. In our world, actually, probably what we call in science instinct for survival, I think Buddha would have liked that as an equivalent of ego grasping. It's a sleeping lion most of the time. But if you come along and somebody abuses you or attacks you, guess what rises? This panic-stricken sense of self, isn't it? You have palpitations, you pee in your pants, you collapse, your heart beats so fast you're going to die. There's complete primordial fear. Would you agree? Yes. We call it instinct for survival, don't we? Mm-hmm. Well, Buddha, I think he would like that. That's called ego grasping. That's the root delusion. That's the indicator of the presence of this belief in the inherent I. Most of the time we're walking around unthreatened, so it's just there as an assumption. But when you get attacked, insulted, offended, hurt, stolen from, punch in the nose, whatever, check your life. This constant I, this I, that I, this. The distress is terrible, isn't it? That's what we call suffering. That's because your I has been offended. But the Buddha's saying that ego grasping is believing in an I that's inherent that doesn't exist there. That takes time. We'll keep talking about it. So, because we can deduce from his behaviour that he had in fact realised emptiness. That's how come he could choose his next rebirth. That's how come he knew who he was, because he hadn't lost the plot. He'd kept the plot. They know exactly what they're doing. And they go to the wound they choose and they keep on bopping, you know. So there was no fear. Meaning, and that's very shocking to us. It's not possible for us in our world. He was, even though his head was coming up to the surface for breath, you would have seen a little boy with his mouth open, like this, looking like he's scared. But the way he spoke indicated that his mind was clear. He was going up for air. We would say, if he didn't have instinct for survival, he'd sink to the bottom of the river and go, oh, well, I'm dying, who cares? That's why we say we have to have ego grasping. We have to have instinct for survival, we say in the West. Do you understand? But no, he didn't have it. He didn't have fear, because he could see what was happening. The person known as a louder alarm was about to die, but just like any other time, walking on the street looking at the flowers or drowning, his mind wasn't disturbed. This is an impossibility in our culture. This is not possible. This sounds like insanity. You see what I'm saying? This is what Buddha's saying is possible. So all the fear, all the anxiety, all the dramas, all the neurosis we have, which are the voices of all those delusions, because there's ego grasping and all the other, and their nature is fear. That's what distress is. That's what anxiety is. What fear, all these rubbish, you know. So realizing emptiness and perfecting it, of course, because you cut the belief in the I that doesn't exist, and this is what's hard for us to see. Just to hear the words that because you believe in an I that doesn't exist is why you suffer sounds very abstract to us, you know. That's why you have to think about it and study it and meditate on it so long. Yeah.
Then what part was trying to catch its breath?
His body. Obviously, your body breathes, isn't it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So his mind, so okay, we've got body and we've got mind. He couldn't breathe because he didn't know how to swim, so there he was choking on water. So he came up to the surface and got some air. But the point is this. If we can assume there were no delusions in his mind, no ego grasping, the root delusion that believes in the inherent I, therefore no attachment to have the I to exist, therefore no fear and anger and stress and worry and anxiety and neurosis and all the rest, none of this. So all that means he had lots of intention, attention, concentration, he had lots of awareness, he had lots of mindfulness, he had lots of all of those technical sides of the mind that was observing very clearly what was going on, but his mind was virtuous. His mind was not, he wasn't necessarily thinking of love and compassion at that moment. There was the absence of all delusions and all sorts of really clear states of mind. So he was checking exactly what's going on. Therefore he had clear wisdom. There was no disturbance. And he got himself out of the river eventually. But his mind would have been peaceful. See, that's inconceivable to us, isn't it? Look, because of all the assumptions we have about what's a real person, you know. Are we communicating?
I'm sorry.
Fear.
I'm Dave.
Dave, hello.
I didn't say that part.
Okay, thanks. So, in other words, what we take as totally normal in our world, which is the presence of ego grasping, Buddha's view, whose nature is fear, panic, fear, and all its voices, attachment. What's attachment? This frantic, attachment is like this frantic, constant, unceasing, panic-stricken craving to get what the supposed I wants every millisecond. And the millisecond it doesn't, it's panic attack. It's called aversion. Oh my God! How can that happen? It's not possible. The John McEnroe, you know. This can't, what do you say? John McEnroe, what do you say? What thing he said?
Bad words.
When he said, this cannot be true. What's he say on the court? He was joking about. John McEnroe, the tennis player.
I can't believe this.
Yeah.
Something like that. Or this cannot be happening. Something like that. That's anger. That's how, you look at when you get a shock. When something is not there, or you want it to be, or the person says the wrong thing, or the red light comes and you're in a hurry, this should not be there. How dare the red light be there? Is that not what happens? That's what anger is. That's what aversion is. Just stress, annoyed, irritated, upset. You drop something and you curse yourself. Because why? Because attachment only wants the nice things. Attachment wants everything to be smooth every millisecond. It's a junkie for nice things. The millisecond it's thwarted, that's what anger is. Mild or intense. And that's what fear is. You just keep going. And it's complete panic attack, primordial, complete freak out. That is the indicator of the presence of delusions, Buddha says. And he has found that, you guess what, baby, you can get rid of them. I mean, you've got to like Buddha. He's a pretty cool guy. Nobody in the West is anything remotely like that. Not even remotely. We, in fact, say it's good to have fear. We need, in instinct for survival. You'd be abnormal if you didn't have anger, we say. You'd be abnormal if you didn't have jealousy, attachment. No comment necessary. Sorry, it's a bit shocking what Buddha's saying. Yeah.
I'm thinking of a situation that happened to me a number of years ago. I took some vitamins, and one of them got stuck in my throat, and it was really clear to me that I was going to die.
Okay, so then what happened?
The air was totally cut off, and I
Okay.
remember having this. I was all alone. It was 11 o'clock at night, and I knew that I didn't have time to get upstairs to see my neighbor for her to help me. I knew that if I called 911, they would never get there in time, right? And so I walked out into the hallway, and I climbed up on the stairs, and I flung myself, but I don't remember being panicky about it. I just flung myself on...
Why are you telling us a story? Just out of interest?
Because I don't know why I... If it was the wanting to keep my... Of course, I guess I wanted to keep myself alive, or I just would have laid down on the floor and suffocated, right? So, but I don't remember... I remember this kind of clarity, you know?
Good, very fortunate.
And I
It
flung...
can happen. Sure thing. But
Yeah.
was it an indication that you realised emptiness? Have you realised emptiness?
Pardon me?
Have you realised emptiness?
I
I'm asking you.
don't know.
Well, so if someone punched you in the nose, you wouldn't be worried. You've got clairvoyance, you see the past, you see the future, you know the minds of all beings, you're blissful all the time, full of radiant love and compassion for all beings.
Not yet.
Okay, well you haven't realised emptiness. So that's fine. So lots of us can have that kind of example, which is great. It's a good indicator that it's possible, isn't it? But the reason we're using Rinpoche as an example, because we happen to know that he was said to be a realised being who had realised emptiness. Do you understand? As an indicator. I mean, people always say that kind of, it's a great. I can speak too from experience like that. But when you really have realised emptiness, when there is no longer the belief in the fantasy I, then that is a constant. You never lose the realisation. You're fearless, blissful, clear, wise, radiant, loving, and can keep growing in that way. Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah.
Thank you.
It's great to have. It's a good example for us. A reminder of what we can be. To have the mind not disturbed. Perfect. Jim.
No, she hasn't.
Where?
I'm just pointing over to Jane.
Jane.
Well, I think the difference, I mean, one of the thing about your story about Rinpoche is that there was no I, there was no sense of I need to save myself. In your example, it reminds me of, there's a book called Deep Survival, where there's some people, when they're drowning,
Yes.
they're like, oh, I'm going to live.
I see.
They're not desperate, but
No,
they
I
just
see.
think
I see.
it-
So they
think
folk-
it through.
yeah, I hear
and then
you.
there are other people who are like,
Yes.
oh shit, I'm drowning.
That's right, exactly. I
That's
see what you're saying.
So
No,
I
it's
think
true.
that was kind of a deep survival moment.
I understand,
Not
yeah.
necessarily correlating to
I
what
see.
Rinpoche was.
Yes. But it's also, yeah, I
Suggesting.
understand. Yeah, that's exactly right. So then the thing is here, you see, it's what's interesting is another whole take on this business is this. The dependent arising, the two truths is all the time you've got to first establish that there is something that does exist, and then you have to establish on that there the absence of something that doesn't exist. There.